Hey guys, today I'm painting a trench tank for Trench Crusade. And I'm going all in on filth, rust and decay. This isn't some parade ground armour, it's a crawling hulk dragged through mud, blood and holy fire. I'll be using fast, gritty techniques to build heavy texture, extreme weathering and corroded metal, all to make it feel like a cursed war machine barely held together by faith and rust. So, let's get started. And before getting into the painting process, there are a few pre-weathering steps that I'm going to be carrying out, and these are important for selling the really grimy, rusty look that I'm going for. And the first step was to remove the religious iconography that are on the panels that surround the turret on the top of the tank. And I'm just going to use some sprue cutters to carefully cut away the raised areas. And just give it a quick pass with some sandpaper to smooth it all out. And this will just give me a smooth surface for me to apply my own transfers and iconography later. And it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, as I am going to be applying some battle damage next. And I'm just going to do that by taking an old, fairly dull scalpel and making some scratches and cuts and dents across all of the armour panels. Just placing them randomly in places that I think there would be additional damage. And you just need to be careful here that you don't cause battle damage to your own hands, which I've done many a time. And once the tank was sufficiently scratched and damaged, I then just go in with some textured basing paste, and again apply this randomly across the model, trying to focus it more in all of the recesses and cracks, and then just using a damp brush to feather out all of the rough edges. And this, combined with all of the pre-damage from the previous step, is going to provide a really nice base for all of the rust that I'm going to be applying towards the end of the process. And once all of that was done, it was now time to get into the painting, firstly by priming the model, and I used DarkForge Hyrax Brown. And it's important that you use a brown primer here rather than a black one, as this brown primer is going to act as the chipping base. And to create the realistic chips and battle damage, I'm firstly going to be applying an all-over coat of AK Worn Effects Chipping Medium. And I'm going to be applying this to all of the brown armour panels, and I'm just going to be using a brush to apply this, but you can use an airbrush if you want as well. And the idea with this product is that it creates a layer between the primer and the actual colour that I'm going to use for the armour panels, which then allows you to come in with some water on top of the armour colour and create battle damage by exposing the base primer through the armour colour. And once applied, I just let this dry for around 20 to 30 minutes, And it is important that you let this dry naturally and don't go in with a hairdryer, as hot air will cause the chipping medium to dry. However, you can come in with a hairdryer if it has a cold setting to help speed up the process. And once dry, I then go in with two of the colours from the Army Painter Olive Green Triad. Firstly with a coat of camouflage green, which unfortunately I seem to have lost the footage for. But I just apply an all-over coat of the camouflage green to all of the armour panels that were covered in the chipping medium, and then come in with a slightly lighter green colour, and in my case this was the necrotic flesh, and just applied this with an airbrush from the top and from 45 degrees to apply a little bit of a highlight to all of the armour panels. And it is important that for these armour colours that you do use an airbrush, as using a brush would mess with the chipping medium below, and by using the airbrush you can lay the paint on top of the chipping medium without disturbing it. I then just come in with a brush that's slightly dampened with some water and use this to apply some moisture to the armour panels, which should reactivate the chipping medium below the armour colour, which in most cases allows you to use the brush to apply pressure to the armour panels, which will create some nice realistic scratches and chips. But you can also use a sharp needle or hobby knife as well, which helps to create some variation in the types of battle damage that's applied. Now that the armour is looking nicely chipped and battle damaged, I'm going to apply a brown filter to certain areas. And I saw this technique on one of the Feral Painter's recent videos, where he used a dark brown colour to shade his tank. And I'm going to do a similar thing here using some Liquitex raw transparent umber. And I'm just going to apply this using an airbrush and try and apply it to the bottom parts of some of the armour panels and into some of the cracks and recesses. And this really helps to add some additional depth and shading to the model, and depending on how you apply it can almost look like some additional dirt or burns on the tank panels. I really like this technique. I've never tried it before, but I think it adds a lot to the model. Next up, I'm going to start to focus on some of the smaller details. Firstly, with the pilgrims that are strapped to the cross and the barrel of the cannon. And I'm firstly going to give them an all-over base coat of Citadel Pallid Witch Flesh, which is a nice sickly colour which will be perfect for the base of these bruised and battered bodies. And before going further with the skin, I'm going to highlight up all of the wood on the cross on the top of the tank. And I'm just going to do this with a very quick two-step dry brush highlight, using Army Painter Leather Brown and Paratrooper Tan from the Brown Triad. giving it a fairly heavy dry brush with the darker leather brown. And then just coming in with a much lighter dry brush of the lighter colour, which is the Paratrooper Tan. And this should give a nice gradient from the brown primer and through the brighter Army Painter colours. Next, I'm going to tackle all of the chains that are strapping the pilgrims to the tank. And I'm just going to do this by base coating all of these chains with some Army Painter Dark Rust, and then coming in with some Army Painter Fresh Rust, which has a much more orangey colour to it, and then applying it very sparingly, randomly across all of the chains, which just helps to give a little bit more variation to the rust. Next up, I'm quickly going to go in with some Army Painter Gun Metal, and I'm just going to be dry brushing this on to all of the tank tracks and wheels, which before this step I painted in black, and this just needs a light dry brush to catch all of the edges and give all of these areas a quick metallic look. And while I've got the metallics out, I'll quickly hit all of the rusted chains as well with an even lighter dry brush, again just to hit a few of the edges and bring out that metallic feel to the rusted chains. Next, I'm going to turn my focus back to the flesh of the pilgrims, and I'm going to give them a quick wash with a 50-50 mix of Caraborg Crimson and Druchii Violet, which will create a nice bruised looking skin tone. And as usual with these washes, I'm just going to apply this all over and wick up any excess pooling that's occurring towards the bottom parts of the model. Next, I'm going to be adding the transfers and iconography to all of the tank panels. And for this, I'm going to be using a mix of some Warhammer Black Templar transfers that I already had, and some other Templar style transfers that I had found on eBay previously. And before applying the transfers, I'll go in with a quick coat of gloss varnish to all of the areas that are going to be getting transfers. And once that dried, I just use a combination of Microsol and Microset to apply the transfers to the surface, which can be a little bit of a tricky process, but once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad. Now that the transfers had been applied, it was now time to blend them into the rest of the battle damage on the tank panels. And to do this, you simply need to go in with some of the previous colours, like the green used for all of the armour panels, and just use this to apply some scratches and chips across all of the areas that you applied the transfers to. And then switch to a dark brown and apply some additional chips and scratches that, when applied, will look like even deeper battle damage. And this will help to blend the transfers in to the rest of the battle damage. However, they still will look a little bit overly bright in comparison to the rest of the tank. So for that reason, I'm going to go back in with the Liquitex Raw Transparent Umber, which I initially used to pre-shade the armour panels. And I'm just going to use this to give all of the transfers a quick blast, which is going to give them all a nice yellowish brown tint, and really blend it into the rest of the tank and make them look like they've been there for years. Now that everything was looking nice and battle damaged, it was time to go in and add some of the final finishing touches. Firstly, with some Villainy Inks Caput Mortem, and I'm going to use this as a wash for all of the flesh on the pilgrims that are strapped to the cross and barrel of the tank. And I'm just going to give them an all-over coat and allow it to flow into all of the recesses. Then allow it to dry for around 30 minutes. And then come in with some makeup sponges and perform a removal pass, wiping away all of the excess enamel wash from all of the raised and upward-facing surfaces, which should keep some of the enamel wash in all of the deepest of recesses. Then I'm going to come in with an all-over wash of Villainy Inks Decrepit Filth, and I'm going to apply this to all areas, including the pilgrims, and just follow the exact same process by allowing it to flow into all of the recesses, allowing it to dry for around 30 minutes, and then coming in with some makeup sponges to remove all of the excess. The next part of the process is where I'm going to be adding the rust effects, and for this I'm going to be using some Dirty Down Rust, which is an incredibly realistic rust effect, and I'm going to be applying this fairly heavily as I really want to push the rusty battle damaged look. And I'm going to apply a fairly big blob of this to all of the areas that I applied the textured basing paste to at the beginning of the process, and a few other random areas across the tank as well, mainly again towards the recesses and areas that would be naturally rusted. And once applied, I'll go in with a slightly dampened brush and use this to feather out all of the hard edges and blend it into the armour of the tank. And this should give you a really realistic looking rusted effect. And the final part of the process was to add a little bit of blood and gore, especially to the pilgrims that are strapped to the tank. And as usual for this, I'm going to be using a combination of Army Painter dried blood and true blood. And I'm going to be using the white spirit technique here and applying a quick coat of white spirits to all of the flesh. And before that dries, which takes around 1 to 2 minutes, I then just go in with the blood effects and stipple them on, and the white spirit barrier helps to create some really interesting blood effects, which can be manipulated with a dry brush to create some smears and streaks as well. And the very final step of the process was to use an old toothbrush to dip into the blood effects and spray a few blood splatters across the armour panels. And this should just add a little bit of gore and variation to the already rusted and grimy panels. And that's the tank now complete, and I'm really happy with the heavily weathered rusted armour. I really like the way that the orange rust is offset by the green armour panels, and everything's looking dirty, damaged and rusted, as if it's been battling through the trenches for decades. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and a big thank you to all of my Patreon subscribers. This video, along with an upcoming Krieg video, which I'm going to be working on, was voted on by you guys. So a big thank you to you all, and your support is really appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one.